Good evening and welcome to this episode 6 of the Sullen Art Podcast. Tonight, our special guest is Jeff Towns, the owner and proprietor of the Dylan's Mobile Bookstore. With me tonight are my usual co-hosts. If you'd like to introduce yourselves, please, boys.
I'm Iqbal Malik.
And Chris Hogan.
How are you, lads? You okay?
Good.
Doing well, mate. Doing
Bearing
well.
up under the weather?
Bearing
Yeah.
up, flipping hot, but it's good to have Mr. Hogan back on this week.
Yeah, it was
as
a
well.
little bit strange not having him that side of me and that
Yeah.
side of you.
Yeah,
Because
it's like a dark cloud that's kind
He's
of
a
come
very
back
dark-
again,
very
isn't
dark
it?
cloud.
It's sunny out, but it's
Good,
just a
it's been
dark
too
cloud.
hot, you need the cloud.
But at the same time, it was a very different podcast we did last week. So if you're following it linearly, you'll know where we were. It was just a simple head-to-head, alas, Smith and Jones.
Indeed.
But tonight, thankfully, we've actually got someone of some importance as opposed to us two being silly.
Yeah.
Jeff, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm a bookseller, basically, that's it. I came to Swansea in 1970 and set up a bookshop at 75 High Street, that's north of High Street Station. And because I was in Swansea and because I liked Dylan Thomas, I had the audacity to call the bookstore Dylan's Bookstore. So founded it in 1970 at High Street, moved to St Helens Road, moved to Oxford Street, moved various places, and then settled by about 1980, I think, in Salubrious Passage, which was a God-given gift for a bookseller. To be a bookseller with an address in Salubrious Passage is such a wonderful word and name. So I was there, and I had a general second-hand shop in the Passage, but I did rare book fairs in London every month and all around the British Isles. And then I went to America 5 times a year selling rare books, and Canada and Amsterdam. And so I was for 30 years a serious bookseller. And then the internet came along and fucked it all up, good and proper. And so now I'm a frivolous bookseller. So I don't have an open shop anymore, but I've got this big old library van, which is called Dylan's Mobile Bookstore, and I drive that around to festivals and craft markets and literary events and art car boot fairs and just sell books out of the book bus.
So originally not from Swansea, where are you
No, West Ham. I grew up in East End of London,
Right.
and my mother was Welsh, and good Welsh, like from a mining family in Monmouthshire. Not all Welsh are good, but like she was proper mining Welsh, South Wales. Spoke a little bit of Welsh, would say achavi to me and call me a mucking. But
Blue collar in a sense then.
yeah, she left this mining village she lived in. Was a place called Anasthee, but it's spelled Ynysddu. And when I was a kid and I used to go to the post office and post letters back to my gran, I look at this envelope and I think, what the fuck is that? Ynysddu. Pronounce. I used to go in the playground and say to my mates, that's where my gran lives, say it. And they couldn't. I couldn't say it until I got to Wales. I didn't know that it's Anasthee.
So when was that moment of you discovering Dylan Thomas? Do you remember it at all?
Yeah, kind of. It's a weird thing. I think I've told this story so many times. I think it's true.
Good.
Yeah,
it's one of those, yeah.
So the first LP that I ever bought was Bob Dylan's first LP. The first
Okay.
LP he'd ever released in 1964, I think it is. And it's that one where he's just got a jacket with the fur collar up, and it's a phenomenal LP. It was the first LP I ever bought. And I bought it, took it home, played it on this dance set in my bedroom, played it so much it played both sides at once. And then I read somewhere that he was born as a Jewish lad in Minnesota, Hibbing, and his name was Robert Zimmerman. But he changed his name to Bob Dylan, and early doors he said to his girlfriend that he used to read Dylan Thomas and he changed it because of Dylan Thomas. Mm-hmm. So I said to my mother, she knew about poetry, she read poetry, she was a bright woman, who's Dylan Thomas? And she gave me a biography of Dylan Thomas, the Fitzgibbon biography, very romantic biography of him. Fitzgibbon was a drinking mate of his, ended up alcoholic like Dylan, but Irishman. Fitzgibbon wrote this biography. My mum gave it me. I read it. And from then on, it was Bob Dylan for music, Dylan Thomas for literature, Bob Dylan for music, Dylan Thomas. It's been like that for 50 years.
So was there ever that sort of moment when you were in that part of London where you thought, I'm going to try and gravitate towards Swansea one day?
Well, I think this all happened before, when I was like 14, 15, 16. When I decided I was going to go to college, I could have gone, I was a jock. I was going to do physical education and English. And I could have gone to Loughborough, but there was my PE teacher in this school in the East End of London was from Wales, North Walian guy. Interesting man, used to have 3 double brandies for breakfast.
You're kidding.
No, when we went on trips with him, like go canoeing up he'd get up in the morning, cigar and 3 double brandies.
Oh, that's my kind of breakfast.
Yeah, well, that's my kind of PE teacher.
Yeah, what PE teacher, yeah.
So anyway, he said to me, "You want to go to Loughborough, go to Cardiff. I'll make a phone call." And that's what happened. He made a phone call. And because my mum was Welsh, because I had this family in the valleys around Cardiff, I came down to Cardiff. And I loved it. It was great. I was in the same year as J.J. Williams. Gareth Edwards was the year above me.
Right.
So it was a real weird culture shock for me because I'd never seen a game of rugby. Like in West Ham, nobody plays with an egg-shaped ball. We all play soccer there. So, I came to Cardiff. And then in Cardiff, I met my missus, and she was from Swansea. And I must admit, I was in Cardiff from 67 to 71. I had 4 years there. And I didn't like Cardiff then. It was a bit of a dump. I didn't like the accent. And I came to Swansea.
My
and I bloody loved it. My missus brought me back here.
Yeah.
Castle Square, Sydney Heath.
So this is about 1960s or something?
I got to Swansea. I first came to Swansea in about 1967 to play basketball against the college here. And then I started courting my missus and would come back here for weekends and then settled here. When I finished in college, came back here, got married, and I've been here ever since. And I don't regret one bit of it.
No, because it does. This is something we've discussed on previous podcasts. It does have this enchantment about it for other people. And as my father always says, well, you claimed it was your dad. We live where people come on holiday, and it is very true.
It's a fantastic place.
It is.
It
can be.
And it's ever since I've been here, it's been challenged. The city centre's been a mess all the way through. I think I actually coined the phrase, what the Luftwaffe started, Swansea Council finished. But I claim it because I did say it early doors. And I do say it again, and they're still at it as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. But they can't really spoil the place because it's got this incredible dichotomy that Dylan Thomas talked about, ugly, lovely. It's got Swansea East and it's got Swansea West. Yeah. I grew up in London and I used to go out the West End to have fun. So I knew about the difference between East End and West End. But Swansea, the gap is as big as I've seen. I've been in New York, when you walk from Broadway into Harlem and it just all changes. Swansea, it's ferocious. And all the time I've been here, it's not got any closer. If anything, it's got wider. Houses in... I live in Newton now. I got lucky enough, moved down there.
Around the corner from me.
Yeah.
And West Cross.
Yeah, right. No, I just think that Swansea's still got this incredible divide, but it's what gives it its kind of colour, I think.
Do you like it? Do you like it around there? Because I live Rushwing Close, so it's about 10-minute walk to the Rock and Fountain for me. And I love going back through the orchard, and I love that little bit there, and I love all the little lanes. And then obviously you get down past Oystermouth into the Mumbles itself. You do find yourself caught up in Dylan's world a little bit, I feel.
Well, my house is I live in a place called the Old Manse, 5 Summerland Lane. And just up from the Rock and Fountain, there's a huge chapel called Paraclete Chapel. Yep. Well, my house is the vicarage to that house, the Manse, the Old Manse. And every weekend, Dylan Thomas stayed in that house with his auntie and his mum and had to go to church 3 times a day on Sunday. And learnt about the Bible. And
did you know that before you bought it?
Well, the truth of the matter is yes, but no. In as much as I did know, because I read in the Fitzgibbon biography that Dylan went down to Newton and used to make little paper boats and put them down the gutters and everything, and loved going to Newton. And I knew that I'd read in that biography that his uncle was the minister of a chapel and all of that. But when it actually came to buying it, that had gone out of my head. And I bought it at auction, and I stopped bidding it's a long time ago, and it was a wreck. I stopped bidding at 35 grand because I thought that was enough for it. And next bid, my missus put her hand up. And so we bought it for 35.5 grand, and that's how I got the house. Yeah. So I almost didn't buy it. And then after I'd been there for a while, my daughter was in school in Newton Primary School, and she came home and she said, "Dad, I've got to do a project about my house." So I said, oh, yeah, well, this house is a vicarage. And I started to get, and then I discovered this newspaper article by Dylan Thomas called The End of a Great Ministry. And it was all about his uncle retiring from the church. The last article he wrote for the Swansea Herald before he stopped being a journalist. So, yeah, I did know, but at the time of purchase, it had got out of my head. But
has anyone sort of ever approached you? Because obviously it's like there's almost like a Dylan Thomas trail in Swansea.
yeah, I put as soon as I found out, I had a friend who's a good sculptor called Philip Chatfield. He did a lot of the sculptures on the marina, and I got him to carve a stone that just says Dylan Thomas stayed here, and then 2 lines from Fern Hill. So it's there, and people do come down and see it. And I think I wrote a guide to Mumbles for Swansea Council, a little Dylan Thomas guide back in 2000, something like that. And it's in there that, you can come down to see where he lived and stayed in the Mumbles.
There's something quite beautiful about, I'm trying to choose my words right, because I don't want to say outsider, but like you have an appreciation. You can obviously, you can't see because it's the podcast is audio at the moment, but well, are we actually filming it? Yeah. We are filming it, putting it up. But your eyes are lighting up every time you say it. It's like your love for it is really quite astounding and I can see the love for the area as well, because having grown up there are people that I kind of know that don't like the area, but it's really nice and refreshing that you're there, you live there, and you just embrace it.
We live in a bubble. There's no doubt about that,
I agree on that,
but it's a lovely bubble to live in, so you can't really knock it, but you have to be aware that you're living in a bubble.
Oh yeah, I mean, you go down to Dick Barton's, get your newspapers from Lewis News, and you're back up the hill and you forget about it.
And now, see, Tim Batcup, who you should get on this podcast as well, he was in that rock and roll band.
Liberty 37.
Yeah, so Tim worked with me for 20 years, and now he runs the best bookshop in Swansea.
Well, my business partner Conrad, who runs a guitar store with me, he used to drive Liberty 37, so he's big mates with Tim.
Yeah. Well, everybody's big mate. In Swansea, like they took about 5 degrees of separation. In Swansea, it's 1 degree of separation.
Spitting at someone, yeah.
So yeah, Tim now has got a great bookshop there. So basically, everything I need is in the Mumbles, and so now I don't have I've still got a storeroom in Swansea. I've been there all day today on King Edward Road, but really, I only go to town to go to the station.
Yeah.
And then I'll go up High Street to Jane's Gallery and Elysium, and I'm out and about. I know Jane. Like that. Yeah, sure.
Jane's lovely. I think we might have met there when Jane was doing one of her evenings there.
I'm sure your face is a bit familiar.
I think I might serve you, yeah.
Being in Jane's.
Yeah, Jane's one of the most nicest people I've ever met. She's incredible.
She's crazy, wonderfully crazy.
No, but she's amazing.
Yeah, she's a wonderful artist too, and she should actually make more of that. She's a fantastic artist.
She's a beautiful person.
And now I'm going to dinner with her, I think, in about 2 weeks' time. And she's in this chapel she's got in St Clair's.
She moved. She's
got a chapel. She's got an incredible chapel.
She's still got the dogs, hasn't she?
Yeah. She'll always have the dogs. Always
They're
have
amazing,
the dogs.
both of them.
Yeah, sure.
Please
but she's got this fantastic chapel in St Clair's. And she's done it up. It's fantastic.
She still has the Damien Hirst.
She's got a few, I think.
I know. I've seen them when I first went over House of Silver. I can't believe it.
She's just so laid back about that.
Yeah,
she's and for her to come back to Swansea and done what she's done on High Street, and not given up in the sort of. I mean, I think me and a nice lady are the only people who ever bought pictures off her. When she had really good pictures, I bought 2 wonderful Peter Blakes off her. I bought the box of stuff that she made.
That was amazing.
Sensational.
That was a huge undertaking because I was seeing somebody at the time who was friendly with it, and she just started on those.
No, it's unbelievable what she did there.
But the amount of work she was putting in there, because we were going around the house and she was so focused.
Sure.
And so it was.
Oh no, she is a piece of work. Serious. And she belies it because she's a yoga teacher. She's with her dog. She's scatty, but God, she's amazing. So
she's one of those people, though. If the chips were down, she'd come and help you.
Oh no,
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've run away with the conversation.
Sure.
Do you want to interject?
I don't. I wasn't. I was just listening to that. Really, it's
we're
nice.
growing out. Jeff and I are growing out.
Like you were saying, places with 5 degrees of separation. I mean, Swansea is that kind of entity, isn't it? I think you said 1 degree of separation, which is probably more accurate.
Yeah, yes, I say
it's one of those towns, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you go away from here, you go places and in next to no time, someone knows somebody that, Swansea's got that kind of diaspora that people go off.
Yeah.
I don't know. Different things and they come back. And,
I don't know whether that's a blessing or a curse sometimes. I think it's a bit of both, isn't it?
I think it's just a blessing.
I like it.
You think
it
so?
Makes me
yeah.
feel comfortable
yeah.
when I went out to see some long lost relatives the other day. They were from up where my mother was from, but they've settled by the tower just at Jersey Marine, which was phenomenal, so beautiful. And I went to see them, and they know the solicitor who owns this house. Jeff rents this off a nice guy who bought it and now and wants to keep it, but is happy to let Jeff do what he does here. And they go out for a drink every other weekend with, I've forgotten his name, but he's a solicitor I've met when he owned the house. So, yeah, no, it's a good place to live.
I disagree with that statement. I think it is because people come together in this town, and that's really important to my mind. They do. I think what we discussed on the previous podcast about certain bureaucratic apparatus that stop any forward progression, i.e. the council, that's the problem.
Yeah, that's true, and that's something I wouldn't mind getting into with Jeff as well. To be honest, it is nice getting. Yeah, well, I mean, maybe not piled straight in with that, but no, I think a certain level of anonymity can be nice in a town, and I think that is something that is not really going to happen in Swansea. In fairness,
no, you lived in London. How long did you live in London for?
Oh, well, I was born in London, but we moved when I was very, very young. I mean, I must have been 3 years old.
Whereabouts in London were you born?
Born in Lambeth,
right,
and moved then.
That's south of the river, isn't it?
South of the river, yeah. Moved to Port Talbot when about 3 years old, right, and then stayed there for a bit. I mean, I've got some amazing memories of that place, to be honest, the Brombill and the amazing sort of hills and whatnot.
The first time I ever came from Cardiff to Swansea, and I came at night in a van to play basketball against the college here, and when I first saw the steelworks, I thought it was Cape Canaveral.
Everyone says that.
I'd never seen anything in my life.
It's stunning at night.
Oh, it's not the same. It's not as big as it was. But when you saw it, this is like 67 or something like that. Coming down the motorway, thinking, oh yeah, I'm going West Wales. And suddenly on my left,
that emerges, doesn't it?
What the hell is that all about? It was stunning.
Well, I have to be honest, anytime I go away and I sort of come back now and I sort of see that site coming back in, I do feel like, all right, that's the start of home for me.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of...
6 months to go. When I see that, it's 6 months to go.
Yeah.
It used to be the bridge for me. I used to drive to London a couple of times a month to do business. And coming back, the bridge, I'm back in Wales, and I know pretty much late at night, it's an hour from the bridge to where I live.
Yeah. It's a nice feeling.
Then when you see the steelworks, you're getting close to the next vista is you can see the Mumbles, so you're just in then. So.
Yeah, that's true. You hit junction 42, don't you?
Yeah.
You still see the sort of Port Talbot steelworks, and you can see the Mumbles. It's just that's a nice sweep, isn't it?
I know what you're saying about the anonymity, but I think the anonymity, in my experience, if you keep your powder dry and you never mow another man's lawn, I think you'll be fine.
There's so many euphemisms.
No,
in there,
but you know what I'm saying. It's always come across to me that people who complain about that sort of thing, no good boyo, to quote Dylan, in a way. If you above board and you don't hurt anyone, place like Swansea or Mumbles, you get on fine. And that's the thing, because everybody knows everybody, and that's okay. And if you're okay, then you're okay. But it's when you start, pushing the limits and trying to take it from people and whatnot, then there is a problem. So personally, I don't have a problem with it because I keep my Tinder dry.
Yeah, okay.
Simple as.
Well,
so far.
That's the rule.
So far. So far.
Yeah, we're trying to get him out of that, but
I'm not a goody two shoes. I'm a miserable curmudgeon at times, but generally, I think But I know I love the fact. I mean, because obviously now, I don't know Jeff well enough, but I hope there could be a point where I'm in the Mumbles and I see him and like, oh hello, how are you doing? What's going on?
And
best mates now.
And the bloke who drove my mate, and Jane, and if you're in Swansea, and what happens in Swansea, I think, is that you meet somebody. And they got a group of friends, and you're automatically part of that group. So you don't know them all, but you're then part of that. And then you meet one of them, takes you to his group of friends. So
the biggest example of that I've seen in Swansea is in the music scene.
Yeah,
that's when you really see it.
Oh, sure.
Like people, I know him.
But it's probably the same in the poetry scene as well, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, there's
when you get those sort of. The music is much bigger than the poetry scene, I would imagine.
Yeah.
The music scene in Swansea is vibrant, isn't it? And. When the music scene in Wales is vibrant, Cardiff is hot at the moment. God, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, there always is.
Yeah, but Swansea's good, So,
what's the most jaw-dropping, say, first editional book that you ever came across in your time as a collector and purveyor of books? Was there ever a moment you sort of walked into some dusky sort of place and went, "Wow, hang on"?
There's been a good few of those, But I have. Weirdly, although I'm kind of messing about at the moment, just tidying things up, I've still got a lot of books left. that I've got to get rid of. I've been selling collections that I've built. I had a collection of books by Bruce Chatwin that's gone to Harvard University, that sort of caper. But you're looking at sitting with the proud owner of 1/3 of Sylvia Plath's annotated copy of Dylan Thomas's poems. Wow. And that's holy shit.
Now, how did you come across such a find?
Well, it was nice. It was just one of those things. There's an auction house in London called Bonham's. One of my pals works there, and he sent me an email and he said, "Jeff, you've not bought anything off us for a while. You might be interested in this. We've got Sylvia Plath's copy of Dylan Thomas's poems with her annotations in." And at that point in time, I'd been doing some business with a hotshot dealer in New York City and a hotshot dealer in London City. And I had the cheek just to go to these two guys who had 10 times more money than me, maybe 100 times more money than me, maybe 1,000 times, and said, "Don't you think the three of us should have a go at this book?" And they came back and said, "Jeff, that's a good idea." So a book that would have been out of my range, really, especially these days, I'm now third owner of it with two great booksellers, and we'll have some fun with it.
So how does that work? Do you rotate the ownership?
Well, at the moment, the guy who's in London, he said, "Do you mind if we use my paddle when we bid at Bonham's auction for it?" And I said, "No, go ahead. It saves me making any fuss." And so once we bought it, I paid my third. He'll catalogue it, although I've sent him a lot of stuff about Sylvia Plath's long-time interest in Dylan Thomas. And
I never knew that.
She was besotted with him.
Really?
And the only thing that supplanted him was when she met Ted Hughes.
Well, I was just about to say.
Yeah. No, she
So she longed for him.
She actually at one point she was a very good scholar when she was at university. She could write, and she got an internment at a magazine in New York City as an assistant literary editor. Mademoiselle magazine is called. It's like Vogue or something. And she was working there when Dylan Thomas was in New York, and he went there and sold them A Child's Christmas in Wales to put in their magazine. Sold them the script. He'd sold it 2 or 3 times before, but that was his game. He'd go there and say, "This is a new thing I've written," and he sold it. And he sold it to a woman who he went on to have an affair with. And Sylvia Plath was so cross that she didn't get to meet him. And she eventually did go and see him read, and she never forgot it until she met Ted Hughes. And then she said, "I used to think that Dylan Thomas was the only person who I could listen to reading poetry, but now Ted is even better than Dylan." So at that point, Ted took over from Dylan.
Well, her and Ted didn't end well. No. But I was going to say,
she was it's an incredible story. I was about to say she was a disaster waiting to happen. Ted comes out of it bad because his next wife committed suicide as well, but his next wife took 2 kids down with her as well, I think. So,
I didn't know that.
So 2 of his partners committed suicide, which doesn't reflect well on Ted.
And I think they committed suicide in pretty much identical ways, didn't they? Unless
one was head in the oven, I think. Were they both head in the oven or something like that?
I thought it was something similar, to be
honest.
Yeah,
it might be. It's just a tragic story. There's no doubt about it. But Sylvia was disturbed. She was an interesting, incredible writer, I think. She wrote short stories. She wrote one incredible story called "The $10 Tattoo." And she must have been to tattoo parlors in New York City and watched it. It's about how this tattoo parlor, every tattoo was $5. And she went there with a guy who said he wanted a $10 tattoo. And she describes the whole process of him picking the tattoo and it being inked on him and all that. Fantastic bit of prose. She could really write. She could.
Did Sylvia, because you're going to know more about this, did she ever interact with your Ginsbergs, or was she not as Kerouac or anyone like that?
She's kind of before them. But you see, what I find really interesting, and I'll tell you about another great book I got. I was astounded when I learned, but I can't remember how I learned, that Allen Ginsberg met Dylan Thomas in New York and wrote about it in his journals. And I've got the journals and I've read from it, and it's an amazing account. He's in a bar and Dylan comes in and they start to talk, and Dylan wants to go and see 2 women having sex, and Alan can't provide that, but he said, "I've got a few boys, we could have some fun and come back to mine." And it's a wonderful account. And so I knew this then. And it, to me, like I always thought that Dylan Thomas was then and the Beats were now. You know, like for me in my head, I grew up with sort of standard writers, and then the Beats came along and took everything. So when I learned that Dylan Thomas had met Ginsberg, and I bought in a shop in San Francisco, collected poems, Dylan Thomas. On the front flyleaf it says Allen Ginsberg, New York, 1953. It's his copy. And on one poem, he's added a line to the poem. Light breaks where no sun shines, a great Dylan Thomas poem. Allen's added a line at the end it's got the word asphalt in, which is a word, it's not a Dylan word, it's a Ginsberg word, from Howl, the asphalt's everywhere. So I've got that book. That's another great book.
So are those originals then, Jeff, as well?
Yeah.
Those books, that's just,
I don't mess around. Mate.
Yeah.
I'm a bookseller. And if I get something good, I keep it.
He doesn't sell Stropes. He doesn't sell Stropes.
I mean, that's amazing. I really would like to see those collections. That's incredible.
I put it on display, and I've talked about it. I met Ginsberg. He came to the shop.
What do you make of him?
Well, I really liked him, and I still really like him. I've just watched the Rolling Thunder film. He doesn't come out of that too well. Him and Orlovsky end up being roadies because he wanted to read like all poets. He wanted to read for too long, and every Rolling Thunder concert, there were so many people who wanted to do their thing that they kept cutting him down to 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. But there's great footage of Ginsberg in the film, but Orlovsky end up carrying all the bags.
I am going to ask, did you ever meet Hunter?
No.
Were you ever in the same sort of circles at all at any point?
No. There's a guy in Swansea who met him, just because there's been a lot of stuff online about Hunter. A guy called Andrew Keane runs a PR company in Swansea, MGB PR company. He's a tidy guy. He was in Aspen and he bumped into Hunter in the John.
You can imagine that.
Oh. I don't know. I think I might have been scared. I mean, I met Ted Hughes, I met Allen Ginsberg, I met Seamus Heaney, I met R.S. Thomas. So that's like, I think, that's big four, isn't it? Like for
R.S. Thomas is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, he was of all of them, he was the least person I'd like to get stuck in a lift with.
What, drain the life out of you?
Well, even though he was a bit dour.
Really?
Yeah. But Ted was lovely. Seamus was amazing. And Ginsberg came to the shop and bought a Mabinogion off me and talked about Welsh folklore. And I kept going to my storeroom, which was next door in Salubrious Passage. Upstairs I had a big storeroom, and finding little magazines that I wanted him to sign for me. And I'd bring this magazine down and it'd have a poem by him, like printed on a Xerox machine in Cardiff by Peter Finch. And he'd look at it, I haven't got that, put it on his pile. I'd go and get another one. I haven't got that one, put it on a pile. I couldn't find it. In the end, I found a thing called Apple magazine that a guy brought out that had a flexi disc in it of Ginsberg reading, and he signed the record and that book for me. So
out of that selection of poets then, Jeff, I mean, am I making the right assumption that your favourite poet is sort of Dylan Thomas, or is that too difficult a question?
No, I think he's the poet that I've hung around with for so long.
What's the reason for that then?
I think he's a great writer. At the end of the day, I just think he's a great writer. I don't think he was the greatest human being in a lot of ways, but I think he was a great writer. I also think that his prose is undervalued, that the short stories in Portrait of the Artist about this town are absolutely phenomenal.
Does that affect your relationship at all? I know it's quite common these days for it. Well, the term online is cancel culture when, say, a celebrity or artist, something from their past comes up, and then everything must be sort of like a slash and burn policy. But to your mind, you said that you're not the greatest people. Does that ever impinge on your enjoyment at all?
No, I find it hard. Hell, man, I read a letter. I wrote a piece recently on Dylan Thomas's obsession with hermaphrodites, and it's a long piece. Got published in an American journal.
You wrote it.
Yeah,
no, you wrote it.
I wrote this long piece on Dylan Thomas and hermaphrodites.
Pray continue.
Well, it's a great story because he uses the word in poems twice, once published, once in his notebooks. He uses it in stories. He went with a woman who only had one leg, and between them they drew pictures of hermaphrodites. And he would say, what did he say at the end of that? Kellen Jones in that film Set Fire to the Stars, he was with all these boring Americans at a big meeting. academics. He was bored. And he said something like, "Gentlemen, it's at times like this, I wish I was a hermaphrodite." And they said, "Well, why are you saying that?" Because then we could all go and fuck ourselves.
So you've seen huge changes in Swansea City over the years since you've had the bookstore. Well, you have, really.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Still looks a mess.
Still looks like it. But
I drove through it tonight. God alive, I was in traffic around the bus station. I thought, what am I doing here? It's crazy. But, and you know, my wife just was in Cardiff and I picked her up and she'd seen the new BBC building, which is right by Cardiff Station. And she said, it's a stunning building. Well, Cardiff's got 2, 3, 4 landmark buildings. And it's the Capitol and all that. But is there one building in Swansea that takes your breath away?
BT Tower.
Well, I was talking about this yesterday with
Liberty Stadium.
With
The Liberty Stadium.
right. Yeah, well,
It's probably the most if you think about
there.
structure.
Sure.
Oystermouth
exception of
Castle,
maybe-
that's about it.
Well, no, these are old buildings. There's
Yeah,
some
Castle
fantastic
Gardens.
old buildings here. But
Well, look at
even-
Waterstone. Look, I didn't mean that.
Sure,
that
no,
is it,
I like Waterstones. I like the guy in there. He's a great boy.
That's a beautiful.
It's fantastic.
They've done that outright. So you go up, and then there's a picture of Martin Amis, and I'm done there. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see him. But that's a beautiful building.
I know. But it's not. When I'm talking about new build.
Oh no.
Yeah, have
when was
we
the last?
built one? The new bit of the reference library, you know, that Trinity St David's it is now, that sort of pointed piece there. But the Glenvivian doesn't take your breath away, does it?
No.
You know, there's not an iconic building in this town, I don't think.
Why does that keep happening? Because we
well,
discussed this last week.
well,
It's money.
It is money, but it's also the influencers who are not on the council, but who influence policy. So for example, the Civic Society will go mental if you've got a high-rise, new, amazing building. They'll say, well, it's not in keeping with the skyline, and you just think, well, what about a varied skyline?
Well, you put that.
You can have both, and I know that because I actually used to be a part of that, and I heard those conversations. You think, well, you know, what era are we living in? You know, we've got to move with the times a little bit. Well, what era? Indeed,
They're dinosaurs. They're dinosaurs, and they just until there's a very hard winter and we lose half of them, it's not going to change.
But it's like that Meridian. It's like that Meridian Tower. No one ever goes. They always say, "Oh, it's the tallest building." No one goes, "Look at that building." Do they? There's nothing interesting about the architecture.
It is a phenomenal view from the top. If you take
it is
up
actually,
there,
yeah.
But you're in it. You're not looking at
no,
it.
I know. Yeah. From beyond,
Yeah.
There's not a building in Swansea, I don't think, that they've ever really got an architect in. And you probably don't remember this. In 1995, when Swansea won this incredible UK Year of Literature festival, and they came with money and it came with this and that, they had a competition to build a new library and arts centre in Swansea. And an architect called Will Alsop, great architect, won it. And he was going to build on the car park opposite the Grand Theatre something that went up and then had like a flying saucer on the top of it. And it was a library at the bottom and it was an arts centre in the top. And they realised they couldn't afford to pay him to build it. He'd won the prize, he entered his things, they gave him the award, but they couldn't afford to buy it, to build it. And he was not best pleased. So they came back and they said to him, could you do something other than that? So he came back with more plans where he came back and he took the Glenvivian, and there was a building next to it, which is now a sort of halfway house for kids. It was the old workman's.
The foyer
That's it.
Called,
that building and the reference library across, and he was going to join them up with bridges and bridges across the road and make that into this phenomenal centre, except rather mischievously, because of what was involved and the spec he put on it, that was going to cost only a little bit less than his big building.
Right.
And they wouldn't let him do that either. So he sued them. And he got payment because he won a prize and they didn't give it to him.
For
So
just a little bit less than it would have cost to
that
build.
would have been, no, I don't think he got that. He wasn't that hard. But it's not the first time that someone's won a prize and there's not been the money to build it. But if he'd have built that building, Swansea would be a different place now, I think.
It's a stranglehold.
It's that if all the time. So in the end, There were various other places they were going to do it. It was going to be in what's Morgan's now. They were going to do that up. They were going to take the presses next door and make a history of printing there and do all these plans. And then they got money from Europe and they did the old town hall up as T. Clen, the Literature Centre, Dylan Thomas Centre, which is just a joke.
Yeah,
It's a joke.
Why is it a joke, Jeff?
Well, because they're about to close it. You know?
Really?
Its days are numbered. And it does nothing like it used to do.
Money
But
wasted.
It cost about 10 million, 6 million came from Europe. They had to keep it as an art centre for about 10 or 15 years so that they give the money back. So they kept it that long. And they've had lottery funding, so it's got some funding, and they make under Milkwood puppets in it, and do
The bare minimum to contribute to culture, just to keep the...
And they're given like 2/3 of the building belongs to Trinity St David's now.
Does it really?
Oh,
They've
yeah.
sublet it?
Well, yeah, ages ago that happened. Yeah.
5 years.
Longer than that. Was it? Yeah. I had the bookshop in there. When they did that building up in 1995, on the plans, the big room at the front said bookshop, and they wanted Waterstones or one of those big stores to go there, but there were no people down in that neck of the woods. And so I went to the council and I said, "Have you got anyone for your bookshop yet?" They said no. I said, "I'll fill it with books for you if you want, but I won't pay you any rent. I'll give you a percentage of my turnover." And within a week they came back and said, "We want you to do it." So the night before the building opened, we got the keys to the space and we put loads of folding shelves in there and we filled it with books, and then we eventually made it bigger bookshop. And then Tim Batcup worked there for a year for me in the year of literature. He worked with me and he ran that shop. And then at the end of the year, there was a living for one person out, but not for two. So I gave Tim the shop. So he then ran the shop there and did okay, but then the band took off. So he was on the road with the band more than he was in the bookshop. But so then I took it back over again with the council. And when they decided that they were going to give it to Trinity St David's, they served me notice 28 days to quit. 16 years I'd been there. And they gave me a notice, pushed it under the door of my shop in King Edward Road. You got 28 days to empty the property. There was 50,000 books in it.
So, Jeff, there was one question I did really want to ask you, actually. I did see, like I do with a couple of guests who come in, have a little scout on social media, see what's going on. And I saw a little YouTube clip. It must have been like a 5-minute YouTube sort of story. I can't remember what it was called, and I don't remember if it was your son recording it. I don't know if this is ringing a bell already, but it was about you getting a tattoo. And I'd like to know, A, what the tattoo is, but also the funniest, it's got to be the funniest. Oh, he's got a tattoo out.
For listeners of the podcast.
Okay, my son made that. I've got a massive collection of books on tattooing, the history of tattooing. I've got the first book on tattooing, which is 1646, called Man Transformed. It's an amazing book worth 10 grand.
10 grand?
Wow.
It was published in 1646.
So you've got a first edition, right? Okay.
And it's full of woodcuts. It's called Man Transformed, or The Artificial Changeling, and it's like 1646 when the first voyagers like Magellan that were coming home with stories of people they'd seen, and in the book are woodcuts of every way that people changed their bodies around the world. And there's nothing new under the sun. There's cock rings and there's tattoos and there's earlobes. Everything's been done before. So anyway, I've always been fascinated in tattoos, but my old lady used to say to me, if ever you come home with a tattoo, I'll leave you, So there you go. So I just bought the books and loved it, and was interested in the whole phenomena. And then for my 60th birthday, she gave me a voucher to go to one of the best tattooists in London and get a tattoo. So I was hoisted by my own petard. So I went up to London to this guy called Lowell Hardy. He's written books on tattooing, and he was going to give me a tattoo. And I decided I would have a quote from Dylan Thomas.
What's the quote, Jeff?
The last couple of lines of Fernhill.
That's quite a long...
As I was young and easy, in the mercy in his means, time held me green and dying. Then it goes
So
on.
I sign my chains that I see. So that the whole quote there then is on the tattoo. Let's have a look.
I don't get it out.
Well, we're definitely recording. Whoa,
I don't usually get it out.
Wow. Okay.
that's nice.
It's old style.
That's nice, man.
Yeah.
I like that.
And when I met this guy, Lowell, he was incredible. When I said, it's from Dylan Thomas, he went, didn't he write that under Milkwood? And I said, yeah, he did. So,
Well, I've got to be honest. In this little clip, it had the funniest quote I think I've seen in a long time. Not that. Where you basically turned to the camera and you said, "It's fucking huge. Mother's going to be traumatized."
yeah. My old lady's going to be traumatized.
Was she traumatized?
She thought I was going to get a little dove.
Yeah.
No, so I went up to London because the guy's in Muswell Hill Way, I think, and I stayed at my daughter's. And I was up there on the Friday, and at 11 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. I was still up. My daughter and my grandkids had gone to bed. And I opened the door, and it was my son, and said, I'm going to film it. And he filmed that night. And then when we went to the tattooist, we went in. It was an amazing tattoo parlor. I took a great book with me on tattooing. And when I showed it to them, these guys came out from every room to see this book. And they were guys with tattoos all over their faces. And it was just wild in there. And the week before he tattooed me, he tattooed Kevin Peterson, the cricketer. And while he was tattooing me, Kevin Peterson phoned him and bollocked him because he talked about the tattoo. And Peterson was saying, it's my tattoo, how dare you talk about it? And Lau just goes, fuck off, and carries on doing me. It was, so anyway, Joey filmed it. Yeah, so that's the thing. So my old lady paid for it, and I got a tattoo. Only the one.
Well, it looks very nice.
Well,
you're looking very suntanned as well. I've got to say the
Swansea, isn't it?
It's Swansea tan.
If you're a bookseller who sells books in the open air, like I do most of the time, it ain't sunbathing. It's just being outside.
How did you end up selling books of all the things that you could possibly sell? I mean, it's not something that jumps straight away to mind. No. I've never met a bookseller before.
Right. Well, weirdly, I know lots of books. Of course I do. There are a few big family firms, huge family firms that have been going for centuries. There's one in Bath, there's a few in London. And so the sons or the grandsons go into the business and it's an established business. But otherwise, booksellers come from everywhere. There's no training. There's no, like when I was doing book fairs in London every month, there would be like 100 booksellers in a room. And one of them, lovely boy, Fred Harrington, he'd been a deep sea diver, like with big brass helmet on. And he was on a market, he'd finished diving, his ears had gone, and he was on a market selling hardware. And there was a bookstore next to him, and they decided they wanted to finish, so he took it over. And he ended up being a really good bookseller, selling books for sort of hundreds and thousands. But he didn't read them. He just could look at the pictures and know they were good.
But I get the feeling you read a lot. I mean, I'm not saying you're
I was a big reader when I was a kid. My mother encouraged me to read. And I had a very good English teacher when I was in school who was fantastic and had a huge effect on me.
What was his name?
His name was Niall Devitt. And curiously, he went on to become a bookseller. Yeah. He left teaching. He went on from being a teacher. He was my teacher in school. He used to come to school every day in a black needle-crawled suit with a Band of Bomb badge on his lapel. And one day he just gave me a little bit of paper, like palmed it to me and said, read a book by everyone on that. And it was a list of Nobel Prize winners for literature. Just said, read a book by everyone. He was just a great teacher. So I was bookish. And then when I got to Swansea, my father-in-law was an antique dealer. And he didn't want me to be a teacher. He wanted me to go into business, but I didn't really like antiques that much. And then one day he got in the contents of a library from down in West Wales, and suddenly I was confronted with books. I thought books were paperbacks. So anyway, I was into books in a big way. And so with their help, I opened this little shop on High Street in Swansea. So the rent was 10 shillings a week. 10 shillings, 50 pence a week, the rent.
Has there... I don't. Who's been the most? Have you ever been astounded by? I don't say who's the most famous person, but has there ever been a case you've gone, bloody hell, I can't believe that this person from whatever walk of life there maybe has come in and has been seeking a particular tone, as it were.
I've had some fun, but mainly you get phone calls where somebody says, James Callaghan wants a book. I sold Mick Jagger a copy of Under Milk Wood. And when I was in America, Graham Nash came in the booth and bought stuff. Steve Martin used to come in. I used to do big book fairs in Los Angeles. Or Brad Pitt came in once, and there was a huge book fair with stands all the way around, and he started there, and he went all the way around, putting massive piles of books in everybody's stand. And then his PA was coming behind and just giving the money over. And at some point about there, and I'm here, he got bored and left. So it's half the people in there had the best book fair they'd ever had. I went up to see a pal of mine in Vancouver with a bookshop, and his bookshop was in an old bank, and his rare books were all in a big vault with one of those big metal circular doors.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, Jeff, yeah, you go and look. The rare books are all out there." And one of my best customers out there, you might recognise him, and it was Brian Adams.
Really?
Yeah. So Vancouver, why wouldn't he be? He kept this boy in business. He spent a lot of money with him.
Has there ever been a customer that you haven't sold a book to us and you've gone, I'm not selling it to you? Because obviously I work in a guitar shop. I won't mention the customer in particular, but there was one incident where somebody wanted to buy an amplifier, and it was on behalf of somebody else, and I didn't flatly refuse, but I tried to talk them out of it because...
What is his name?
Well, no, I'll get into that.
I used to not regularly, I would often refuse to sell books.
Yeah, out of principle.
No, people would come in and they'd find a book and they'd come over and they'd say to me, "Oh, I'd like this book, but I'm not giving you £5 for it." So I'd say, "Well, it's a nice book, that's how much it is." And so they'd put it down, or I'd take it off and put it on the desk, and they'd come, "Oh, all right, I'll have it." And I'd say, "No, it's not for sale."
So there's a little bit of truth in black books then.
People. My friends tell me that it's based on my shop.
Really?
Sure. I was not as drunk as he was. But the book trade is fun. I've still got the signs. It says, "You're welcome to come in and browse." You don't have to buy anything when you go in a bookshop, but you do lay yourself open then to every crazy on the streets.
You must have had your fair share.
Man. And weirdly sometimes, because you haven't seen any for a little while, you're sitting there, you've been reading, listening to this, you engage them in conversation because...
Just for the
sheer hell of it, But so, I would refuse to sell books to people.
So, Jeff, when some might call it the devil, but when the internet hit, when it really started picking up and record shops are closing and this is closing and that's closing, how did you deal with that?
Well, I tried. Very early doors, I got a website. I thought, here I am. This is the World Wide Web. I put a website together. I had a nephew who could do it. And I thought I was going to sell Dylan Thomas stuff around the world. I had loads of people looked at the website, but nobody bought anything. And then one fella came in and said, "My friend told me about your website. I want to buy some proper Dylan Thomas. Have you got any original letters? Have you got this?" I said, "Yeah." And he was from Porthcawl. So the World Wide Web got me a great customer from Porthcawl. So I put a website up, and then when the online book selling, there's loads of different platforms that you can sell on, loads of them. The big one was a thing called ABE, which started out called Antiquarian Book Exchange. ABE, still going. It's huge, massive. So I had 7,000 books listed on that at one point. I had a nice bright guy working with me, who's now a Sunday Times journalist, big journalist, but he worked with me for a while, Swansea boy, and he put these books online. It's the most boring thing in the world, entering books, data onto a
ISBN numbers.
Booksellers like writing descriptions of books, but they write flowery descriptions saying what the copy's like and saying why it's important and all the background to it. When you do a thing for the internet, all they want to know is date, price, condition, that's all. They don't want any thought to go into it. But this kid was good. He got halfway with it. So we had 7,000 books online. But when I sold one, sometimes I couldn't find it because I didn't have my books listed in the numerical order that...
You're not Amazon, are you?
No. So me and Tim, we'd hunt around the shop, and if we found it, we'd hug each other and dance. We found the book. And by the time I got back, they'd say, "Oh, we wanted it last week. We've ordered another copy now." And the other thing is that I'd sold books face-to-face in my shop, over the telephone, and at book fairs in London and all over America, where you meet people. and they become your friends, and you learn off them, and you learn from them because they collect things you don't know. But in talking to them and finding them books, you learn. All you learned on the internet was their credit card number, which was interesting and useful, but not the most interesting thing about a person. So there was no warmth. It was not what I was used to doing. So I just took all the books down, and I don't sell online at all.
Speaking of warmth, was there ever a book that you regret selling? I wish I kept those.
Hundreds. Everyone's like drawing teeth. Of the good books, it's all like drawing teeth. So I just don't even think about them now.
No.
I don't think. And, I've found some great stuff, and I usually did well with it. I don't look back. I have some sort of stuff that I know I undersold, but at the time I took a profit, and, that's it. So...
Do you still sell many books to America then as well, Jeff? Or?
I still do some business in America.
You do, yeah.
Yeah. But
I'm assuming you've never taken the mobile bookstore overseas.
I did get a bloody phone call from a production company in Cardiff and said, we want to make a program, and this is it. We take you and your book bus to America. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And you drive around left-wing and socialist bookshops, and you talk to your friends there, and then we end up at Burning Man, and you drive the bus to... Anyway, it didn't come off, and then they said they were going to do it just as a radio program, but wouldn't really have been so good. And then, bless them, some boys I know in Cardiff who make fantastic pizza, they took them on a trip. They bought them a little pizza wagon, and they let them drive through Europe buying all their ingredients and then go to a world pizza. It's on S4C it was. And they won. They won this competition, and they had a great trip out of it. But they got the trip that could have been
Was
been
that
mine.
called the Pizza Boys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen
They're good lads though. They're in Cardiff Market now. They got a big pizza place in Cardiff Market. Yeah. Really nice boys. And it was S4C, and they were well speaking, and they did their thing, and it was great for them. But no, taking them. I used to say that I wanted to die at Burning Man, being burnt on the bus like a gypsy. It's the way to go, isn't it?
Battle of the Beanfield.
Yeah.
On a personal note, did you have any first edition? Actually, there's one first edition I'd love. Cannery Row. Did you ever have any Steinbeck at all?
I've had Steinbeck. Yeah. The thing about collecting those books is that really you want the American first editions. There's a thing called follow the flag. So if it's an American writer, you want the American edition of it. Now, I used to make money when I was selling books by buying English first editions of books and selling them to completist collectors. But if a first American edition of Cannery Row would be worth $5,000, then the first English would only be worth $200. Because it's not the real first edition. So
that's one of my favourite books of all time. It's absolutely beautiful. And the reason I love that book, obviously you've read it.
I used to go to Monterey every year.
Did you really? Yeah. You're at the Docks place?
Yeah. There's a huge aquarium there. Fantastic aquarium.
Did you get the feeling that you could almost transplant the story to Mumbles?
I'll tell you where I thought it was.
Where?
Sandy Lane.
Really?
When I first started to go down Sandy Lane, this is in the 60s.
Southgate.
Yeah, when it was proper.
Hippie Central.
It was incredible. Yeah.
With Mac and the Frogs.
They were all there. And when I went down there, and there were people sitting outside their shacks, but I thought this is Swansea's answer to Cannery Row.
Well, I think it's a very underrated book. I mean, obviously it became a film. Didn't they amalgamated the two? There was it Sweet Thursday or the Sweet Tuesday? No, Sweet Thursday and that. Isn't that... Oh, who's in that? Oh, the guy who's in 48 Hours. I can't remember his name now. Nick Nolte. I think Nick Nolte's in it.
Yeah, saw a film he'd be in.
Yeah, and it didn't really do much for Feb, but that's one of my favourite books, along with Down and Out in Paris.
Yeah. Tell you a book you should have had.
Go on.
A pal of mine in Cardiff was a bookseller in Cardiff, and he used to put all his good books in the basement of his shop. Never sold them. Just put them down there because he didn't know what to charge for them. But he's a good bookseller in one of the arcades in Cardiff. Whenever I went there, I used to say, can I use the toilet? Because it was downstairs. And I'd just go down. When I pee, I'd just go through the books and I'd come up with an armful of books and say, what do you want for these? Oh, no, you're not having them. You're not having them. Anyway, he had a copy of that book inscribed by Orwell to the bookseller who he worked for. You know, he's got a section of he's working in a bookshop, isn't he? And he had the copy that Orwell had inscribed. And Orwell didn't sign many books.
No.
You know, some writers are quite generous with their signatures and others hardly any. And Orwell didn't sign many books.
It's a very interesting book because it's one of the only books I've ever read where when he gets the job as the pot washer, it's the only time I've actually gone, yes, like that, because you've been with him for so long with the struggle to become the prolongeur, and he sold his shoes, he sold the shirt off his back. And then obviously the second half, when he's in London, is a very different affair. It's very dark. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. So with the bookstore at the moment, you were saying to us earlier before the podcast started that the van sadly is not well.
It's not well. It's sick, and I thought at one point it could be terminal. But we're working against it. We're having a go. Like I say, Huey drove it to a garage tonight. Huey's the guy who drives it for me, and my sort of sidekick. He's good as gold, and he drove it to this garage up in Lavera, and we're hoping we can put it back together. I got notions. At one point, Hugh Williams, who Pooh Sticks Hugh, does High Street, finds tenants, works for Coastal. He does, nice guy. He was trying to find a place on High Street where I could park it permanently, and maybe open it a couple of times a week. But it had to be somewhere I could drive it away from, and
just in case.
Well, no, just to go to a festival.
Yeah.
I didn't want it. But now I'm thinking that maybe I could park it permanently somewhere and it doesn't travel. It wouldn't be the same. The other the problem is it costs quite a lot of money to keep it on the road, the insurance and everything. And I don't go to that many festivals. We were doing Latitude, but it was 10 hours to get there and 10 hours to get back. So you could get there all right, but after 4 days at Latitude, driving it back for 10 hours. Huey would drive it, I would be behind in a camper van. We'd do, and I'd just sit behind him we had a blowout coming back one time, and we were 2 hours.
How big is the bookstore?
7.5 ton it is.
7.5 tons?
It's a proper big ex Harrogate. No, I bought it in Harrogate, but it's ex Wakefield County Council. And I had it at Latitude once, parked up, and some poets. I put a sign up on the bus. It says "Poets Wanted," and people just come in and say, "What's that mean?" And I say, "Well, if you're a poet, you can read outside the bus." And we put a thing up, so we have really good poets read outside the bus. And I had this group called the Firm of Poets who are from up north, and there's a group of them, 2 women, 2 men, and they're humorous poets. They read outside the bus, and it was filmed and photographed. And people in Wakefield Library saw my bus, and the stickers still, I never took it off. It says Wakefield County Council. They were so happy that the bus was still going out and doing something,
Where did the idea come from to get a bus, to get mobile?
I was going to the Larne Festival every year. I didn't go the first few, but once finally my son said to me, "Come on, it sounds great, we got to go." So he booked a little cottage and we went down to Larne, and about 5 of us had a cottage, and we had a fantastic time. It was a great little festival, really good festival. So I've been for 10 years odd now, and we were down there one time, and a mate of mine's got a bookshop there, but he kind of willfully shuts it when the festival's on. When there's all these people who want to buy books, he doesn't open. So I said...
I like the sound of this guy.
Yeah, he's a crazy guy. I said, it'd be good to bring some books down here, wouldn't it? Or my son said that. It'd be good if we could bring books down here. And I said, well, if we're going to do that, I'll just buy a mobile library and we'll just fill it with books. That's how it happened. So that's about 6 years ago.
Every book is Dylan Thomas related on...
No.
No? Okay, I'm mistaken.
No, not at all. I try to... That's why it's hard work, actually. I changed the stock because the bus only holds probably 2,000-3,000 books, which is not many books at all, really. So you can't leave the same books on all the time. So if I'm going to Larne, I will put Dylan Thomas on. If I'm going to the Garden Centre of Wales, I'll put my natural history and gardening books on. So I changed the stock to suit where I'm going.
Do you sort of keep a lot of those prized possessions from the previous bookstores on there at all?
Yeah, they're on there. And now they've still got prices in from when I used to do book fairs in London, so they're fancy books and they've got fancy prices in. But I either reduce them quite heavily, or if anybody touches a book, they can have it. They can for whatever they can afford.
That's
the rule.
That's incredible.
It's not. It's just
that's
my children's books are all free.
Yeah,
all the children's books are free, and all the books on the bus, they're just they just can go now. They got. And if somebody sees a book and they go, "Oh, I love this book," and then you see the price, it's like 40 quid. I'll say to them, "Well, could you afford 15 quid for it?" And they'll go, 10? Yeah. And so they have it for 10.
So you're bartering them down.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
So you're
And also
essentially
the
encouraging
bus,
them to.
The bus turns into a free bar at 4 o'clock.
Oh, lovely.
It sounds like education.
Where are you next?
And the drink of choice is absinthe.
Where are you next?
It forgive me for saying this. Don't want to sort of extrapolate too much from it or speak on your behalf, but it sounds like to me you're a man who wants to educate. Hence, like with the children's books, you want to get people reading.
Start them young. There's nothing wrong in that.
And that's beautiful.
No,
It's
it's fine. No, it's great. And then we put a blanket out and chuck all these children's books. I go around. I just go to charity shops and say, listen, if I buy 50 children's books, will a tenner do it? And they say, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
no Katie Price in there at all, but that's pretty good.
Jeff, just out of interest, where do you see your collection going? You're saying that there may be a limited lifespan to the bust for various reasons, but what's going to happen to that afterwards?
Well, I've been selling some collections, the serious collections. I've been placing them with institutions here and there. And sometimes I'm selling them, sometimes I'm gifting them. If I've got no money left in these books anymore and I can gift them, I do that. But one of the reasons I can sell them for whatever I want is if they went to auction now. The internet had a profound effect on the book trade, in as much as you either these days deal in books at £2 or books at not even 2,000, 20,000. The trade is polarised.
Who's buying
so that
books at
rich
20?
people. Rich people.
And I bet they're not even reading
So
them.
they're just stacking them, presumably.
I don't know. To spend their money, people with a lot of money can buy art. And usually they buy art because people see that. And books are a bit difficult because books go on the shelves and you don't...
Yeah.
So they have to like books.
I've got to be honest. I've bought books which are expensive, but and it's almost to make part of that collection. It's on your shelf, and it's particularly if you like an author.
Oh, sure, no. I've got a Richard Brautigan collection. I've got an Ian Sinclair collection. I've got a Will Self collection. I've got all sorts of. I've got a Ginsberg. I've got a Beat collection. That's just bought a really great Bukowski book with a lovely inscription. I still like to buy a nice book from time to time.
I quite like the idea of having a collection. I actually went through a period where I was just trying to pick up books by Michael Foote and just have that.
Sure.
Just have an entire collection of his.
I love the notion of a collection. And also when I was going around buying books, like in other shops and out and about and buying books privately and going to auctions, if you're building collections, there's always something you can buy. I had a lot of collection. I put a massive collection of books on gypsies together, sold that, built another one. I built author collections and stuff.
Do you stock any current poets?
Well, it's hard. I've always found it.
Sell your book.
No. I've always found it hard to mix new and used books. It's not easy to do unless you keep them quite separate. And basically, I'm a used bookseller. But you see, I published I saw a copy here, 18 poems. It's out there by Ollie Lomax. He read on the bus. He's a nice man and a good boy. Crazy. Puked on the bus.
What was the most expensive book you've ever bought, the Nick Bow? Because
it's a different level though, isn't it? We're talking.
You must have spent like 30, 40 quid for a collected poems of E. Cummins or somebody like that, or
it's not. To be honest, it's not necessarily books and poetry. Weirdly, it's been other stuff. And I'll sort of scour those kind of book websites. ABE was saying. I've spent hours on there.
I've got a disclosure which I've never told anyone about a book.
Oh, crikey.
Here we go.
The most expensive book I've ever bought, 20 quid. The Comprehensive Rules of the NFL.
Oh, really?
Cracking.
All my life.
And can you understand it? Can you know?
Yeah. I followed it anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Thought, well, let's learn it properly.
Yeah.
And I was in a second-hand bookshop somewhere in West Wales.
And they
remember the
had a copy.
Eisteddfod was on.
Right.
And my dad's a big reader. So he went in there looking around. Just 20 quid. So yeah. He was paying.
Yeah.
So technically I've never bought
It's
a
how
book.
much you wanted though. It's how much you wanted.
But I got the Comprehensive Rules of the NFL.
No, I'm going to
It's the most expensive.
I'm going to tie that in because one of my favourite books I ever bought was from where the shop is in Derrick's. There's like 2 or 3 shops across. There's like the Red Cross shop in there. And I'm not making this up. I'll bring it in for the podcast next time. I bought a compress because I love baseball. Right. So I spent £1.50 right on this vintage. It was like from the 1950s conference. It wasn't called the conference, but it was like the Player's Field Guide to Baseball, and it was good old American, and it was really wholesome, and there was like picture. But the most expensive book I ever bought, I spent 30 to 40 quid on it. And I was obsessed with Father Ted. Now, before Dylan Morgan, before Dylan Morgan did Father Ted, he did a thing called The Trendy Priest, and it was a very small run on RTE, and it was hysterical. He rode a bike, and it was almost like the forerunner to Father Ted before Arthur and Graham got involved in writing it. 'Cause I can never remember which way round whose surname is whose. And I saw that book in an Oxfam in...
What, the scripts? They collected the scripts together, had they? Or
No. This was the book that Dylan Morgan had written. Very thin book of psalms for the Trendy Priest.
Is that Dylan Moran?
Yeah. Dylan Moran. No. Dylan Morgan was the guy who played Father Ted, wasn't it?
Oh, right. Okay. I'm mixing him up with the guy who was in Black Books. Who's another Irish drunk. Who's Dylan Moran, isn't he, I think? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
This book is just basically his writings about early 80s Irish priests and what they should do to be really cool with the youth of Ireland. And it's like...
Seriously, or as a joke? Ironically?
It's ironically. Yeah. It's an amazing book, and I spent about 34 quid. I found it online. I was desperate for it.
That's a reasonable amount of money.
But that was a lot.
I don't think that's unreasonable. I mean,
How much did you pay for the Communist Manifesto? The one that you and I both
actually,
got?
that is a very good edition. And I got to be honest, I bought that for the cover. And
because it's black with the red flag,
indeed.
Yeah.
But also, it was a special edition book, and this is the thing. It's like you're not necessarily always buying it to read every single word in a book. No. You know, it's part of the love of seeing it and feeling it and kind of having that experience of interacting with it.
I bought they brought out a centenary edition of Origin of the Species with an incredible Damien Hirst cover.
Got that.
Yeah,
I've got that. That's amazing.
I've not opened mine. Mine's still wrapped.
Yeah.
Because I've got copies of the text.
I would never get
It's just an object, you know.
But it's also an original work of art.
Oh, sure.
And that's the thing with the original artwork.
Yeah.
But one of the coolest, one of the original, I think it's an original edition I've seen. So my dad has loads of books. He's big into like American Civil War and stuff. So he's got loads of books. But he has an original print of the Silmarillion by Tolkien.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the most...
So, yeah.
The oldest and most original I've seen, like first press. And that's cool.
You need The Hobbit.
He's got that.
I've got a great edition.
He's got that.
Yeah. But the first edition of The Hobbit is £70,000 now.
Wow.
Yeah. Have you ever had that?
Yeah. But when I had it, it was about 7,000. But it's King Cwmdonkin into that now. Tolkien corrected every dust wrapper because there was a mistake on the dust wrapper. So in his own hand, he makes a little correction on the dust wrapper. So that's why it's a sort of rare book. And the first edition of it wasn't a huge print run. Just like the first edition of Harry Potter was only, I think, 450 copies for school libraries. Nobody thought it was going to be a great book. So that's rare as hen's teeth and worth 25,000, 30,000 now. To find one. And even a school that had one in their library with all their stamps all over it, they managed to get sort of 10 or 12 grand for it and spend it all on the library, which was a good thing to do, to junk this one book and get 12 grand and fill the library with it.
I'd love to have that on my shelf.
What, Harry Potter?
We're going to have a round.
No, we're not going to have a row. What? The knockoff Worst Witch? Because essentially it is just the worst witch.
I just love first editions, mate.
No, I was just saying about Harry Potter. I wasn't having a go. I was just saying, I didn't know you were a Harry Potter fan.
Well, it's not necessarily just
Order of the Phoenix is a good book.
Well, I wouldn't
because things get good in that one.
I just think that I won't have anything said against it because she got kids reading again in a big way.
No, I agree. I agree.
So the fact that kids were queuing to get to the bookshop, to get the next one, that hadn't happened.
It's just with him, he's a very dark horse. He'll turn around one day and just drop something. What?
Yeah, but you see, Jeff, what you fail to understand is like he'll preach at me now about Harry Potter. I wouldn't say I'm the greatest fan in the world, but I mean, this is a gentleman who will wax lyrical all day long about Transformers being one of the best movies ever.
Well, it is the animated
one of the best scripts ever.
We have to be careful about how we're
Orson
keeping
Welles.
that in context.
Superb,
Orson Welles was on so much medication he thought he was doing an advert for children's serial at the time. It's the last film he ever did. And they spent so many hours in post-production trying to correct every sort of little mistake he'd made. So,
do you boys know Sid, who works in the Egypt Centre? SYD?
I think Ed Purcell knows Sid.
He makes CDs every year with a guy called Alistair Kiley, who lives in Spain.
Yeah.
And they record a CD. I'm trying to think what they go out as. Sid's really interesting. In front of the podcast, what he does in the Egypt Centre is really good. And he's a lively, lives in Pontardawe, old punk, writes a bit, does all the lyrics, plays guitar and various other instruments. But he and I go to Morocco every year to this village for a Sufi trance weekend. And that's where I've just got back from.
What's that about?
All right, what's that
Come
about?
on, Jeff.
That's when I was in...
Mr. Towns, come on, you'll have to elaborate on that.
When I said I was in Morocco...
Yeah.
I was in Morocco.
High as the fucking moon in Morocco.
So you go to Tangier and you stay for a couple of days and hang out in Tangier, and then you get a train to the middle of nowhere, and a little fleet of beat-up buses drive you to a little village called Jajuka, which is in the foothills of the Atlas Mountains. And William Burroughs and Timothy Leary went there and said the musicians there were a 4,000-year-old rock band. And a Spanish priest went there in the 12th century and said, I will make you all musicians, and the music you make will heal people. And since then, this village has always had a troupe of musicians that play two reed pipes and a set of different drums. And they play for 6 hours at a time. And they'll all be playing on their pipes, on their drums, and then one of them will just stop and he'll pick up his pipe and he'll fill it with kiff and he'll take a few hits, and then he'll put his pipe down and just pick up the beat straight away, and another one will take his pipe out and just I've
been in rehearsals like that.
It made the news because Brian Jones, when he left the Rolling Stones before he died, he went to Jajuka and made an LP of them. And it didn't come out when he was alive, but the Rolling Stones put it out on their label. It's called The Master Missions of Jajuka with Brian Jones, but he never played with them, he just recorded them. So I think on the second printing of the LP, it just says recorded by Brian Jones. But he went there and recorded them.
I think Wu-Tang Clan had done it.
I said, well...
Wu-Tang Clan went up there, recorded one album, made one press of it, boxed it up in this nice...
Coltrane
worth millions.
Coltrane went there. Jarvis Cocker was there just the other year. Like a lot of musicians get there. It's huge in Japan, so some of the biggest Japanese punk rockers and crazy guys end up there. So they only sell 50 tickets to this festival, and I stay in the house that Brian Jones stayed in, which is with a family. You just stay with the family. There's no running water. There is electricity now, and you just stay for the weekend and just listen to this incredible music. And Sid went before me, and he told me about it, and I said, oh yeah, I'd love to come because it's all about Burroughs and Ginsberg and Burroughs went there. Timothy Leary went there. It's all part of that whole thing.
That was a magical group of poets. But anyway,
that album he's referring to, there's a great clause.
The Wu-Tang.
Yeah, because the Wu-Tang Clan did this.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who bought it is a complete scumbag. He inflated the prices on, I can't remember what it was. It was an AIDS medication. It was a HIV/AIDS medication. It's a real piece of work.
He bought it for $1 million.
Right.
Just one album.
Now, the Wu were really, you don't fuck with the Wu-Tang Clan, right? So he's a bad egg. He's not a nice guy. So there was a clause in the contract, and I pray this was true, but I'm pretty sure it is. And the clause was he could have the album, but the only way that album could come back to the Wu is if they broke into whoever's house had it with Bill Murray. Right?
That's true.
And it's true, yeah.
And dressed as ninjas.
Yeah, they had to go and steal it back. But yeah, that's but it's crazy. The first edition sort of world of things. I mean, you don't think of it that much with, and this goes back to what we were talking about last week with disposable culture. Now, my parents have got a lovely leather-bound set of Dickens novels, complete works. Now, I'm not saying they're 10 a penny, but they were probably quite popular. But if you go to some bookstores, all right, I mean, a lot of people buy books now on the road. If they turn up at a garage, there's some god-awful,
There's books everywhere.
Yeah. But there's no, again, lacking in the craftsmanship. And this goes back to something to do with Frequency House, where we wanted to, produce something that wasn't just a disposable item. It was a piece of art. The whole construct of it, everything, down to the packaging, it was all thought out meticulously. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that you get it, because it seems like you really understand it.
Well, I mean, you're talking, I think, not to put words in your mouth, Jeff, but, someone who appreciates secondhand stuff, essentially, which is, I mean, like I've been into a bookstore, and sometimes I'll sort of look at a book, not necessarily just for the content. It'll be looking at the, the history of it. You can feel the history of it,
What's the most bizarre place you found a book?
Bizarre place.
You've taken.
I have got lucky. I mean, there was a guy in Swansea called Charlie Lyshan. He was a footballer and a boxer, and then he was a roofer, and then he became an antique dealer, and he was a mate of mine. And I was just driving. I hadn't seen him for a long while, and I was driving by the Guildhall, and he was going to play bowls. And I said, "How are things, Charlie?" He said, "Oh, I was thinking of you. I just bought a book." And so he said, "Well, he's in my car." So we sort of walked together around the corner, and he's got a 17th century law book in his car, that was worth about 750 quid. And, I just said, "Well, that's a nice book, Charlie. What do you want for it?" "Oh, I want a lot of money for this, And we had a deal, and it was all fine. So you can find books anywhere, really.
What's the turnover, though, for something like that? I mean, how quick can you shift
Oh,
that? It's going to sit on your shelf
keep
for a
books
long
for a long
time.
time. Yeah. Actually, I sold it then. An American dealer I knew who just dealt in law books came from California and I knew him in California, and he just dealt in law books. Nice man. Him and his wife came over. They wanted somewhere to stay, and I let them stay in a little place I had. And he came to my store and browsed, and he ended up buying it and took it away and sent me a check about 4 months later or something like that. It was all fine.
It's got to cost money, though, isn't it? I mean, to run something like that, it's got to, you've got to have some resource, I think, as well.
One time when I was really going for it, I had a big overdraft. Yeah. No, I was serious. And then it was tough, really, because
So what kept you going through that then, Jeff?
Flipping the books real quick. Buying them here, driving to London, flogging them, taking a small... I took small profits on some great books.
But, I mean, you could have stopped there, couldn't you? But I'm assuming your passion for it, you kind of love for it.
Yeah, but I can't... it is weird now. I say to myself, like, when... I used to deal in books. When I did book fairs in America, my stock might have been worth 25, 30,000. The books that I took, be like 15 boxfuls of books, might be 25, 35,000. But air freight. I used to carry them to start with in 2 suitcases, like a gorilla by the time I got there. Like, because you could have more luggage then. But then I started to use air freight. It was expensive, but you couldn't do anything. The stand next to me would be a big Los Angeles firm who sold books to Michael Jackson and Robin Williams, and they had one book worth more than my entire stock. So it's always been this question of scale. I pushed it as far as I could push it. So, I sold books for 1,000, 1,500, sometimes 2,000. I sold collections for a few. But I dealt in books that mere mortals could aspire to. So that I tried. And even my Dylan Thomas, I kept as cheap as I could and let people pay me over a period of time, because not many people, like when Dylan Thomas letters were 1,500 quid, 2 grand, and somebody might want to buy one, I'd say to them, right, you can give me 4 checks.
Installments.
Just.
I mean, but I think that's a standard thing. I mean, particularly if you're buying a piece of art, which is essentially
the
really
Welsh
where
Arts
that's going.
Council. That's a great thing. So I just did it because I knew that that's the only way you could get things.
And I think quite a lot of galleries do that, don't they? Lots of art galleries, they'll say, well, that costs 2 grand, pay you £500 a month.
Well, everybody wants to sell stuff, and if they can make it work that way. But the numbers are ferocious now.
You seem to have done a lot, Jeff, and like a lot more than I could probably... Well, you've crammed a lot into one lifetime that a lot of people would like to cram into a lot of lifetimes. What does the future hold? What's the next thing to conquer? I mean, this mobile bookstore sounds fantastic. Are you going to wind down, or are you going to do something completely different again?
Hang out in Morocco, mate.
I wouldn't blame him.
I'm going to go there every year, that's for sure. I've booked next year already.
Yeah.
I thought I don't usually like going back to the same place that I've been to, but Sid sort of blagged me to go the first time, and I loved it. And then I thought, I don't need to go back, but I went back, and it was just as good. And I've been back a 3rd time, and I've booked to go back next year. So,
what about book-wise though, or kind of venture-wise?
I wrote a good few books all of a sudden. Like in 2014, I brought out, I think, 3 or 4 books on Dylan Thomas. Either I edited or wrote or put together because I had stuff that hadn't been published.
So have you been writing that with other people as well?
No. I contributed to some. I wrote essays in books that came out of essays in 2014. So I was writing, and then I did a book on Edward Thomas, the poet who died in the First World War. Recently for Parthian, I did that. And I did 3 books with Parthian and then one with Loafer. So I was writing, and I still feel like writing, but I've almost got, not a block. I think what I want to do now is maybe, my son's bright and we get on well. I think I want to sit down with him with a thing like this and just talk and then edit. I've got bored of writing. Every night in bed, I write a book in my head. And in the morning, then I can't be asked to go to the computer and do all that nonsense of.
So where do people get those books from then, Jeff?
Well, my
the
books,
ones you know?
No, they're on sale in the shop. They're on. I've got a page on Amazon. That's Jeff. You put my name in, and these books come up.
I know this is going to sound quite trite, but have you ever thought about writing a book about everything that you've done? A book on books?
No, a lot of people do say to me, and I've started to put together some essays that I wrote. Not essays, pieces that when I was travelling, I'd write something. If I went to the Grand Canyon once. I was doing a book fair in San Francisco, and I had my missus with me. I thought, let's go to the Grand Canyon. So I rented a car, drove to the Grand Canyon, and then somebody said to me, you should go to Sedona. So I went to Sedona, and I'm thinking, why Sedona? Why is it ringing a bell with me? Then I went into a supermarket, and there were all these whiskies for sale, and there was an old Grandad bourbon whiskey. That was Dylan Thomas's favourite whiskey. And then it clicked. Dylan Thomas stayed in Sedona with Max Ernst, the surrealist artist, and his wife Dorothea Tannin. And he stayed for a week in the desert with Max. And I'd forgotten this, but I was in Sedona. And it just got me going. And I own the book that Max Ernst gave to Dylan Thomas when he left. So it says to Dylan and Kate, in French, to Dylan and Caitlin from Max Ernst, who was a great, great surrealist artist. And the fact that Dylan Thomas somehow got off a train in Flagstaff, Arizona, and got himself to and he had no money when he got there. So they just had to live for a week waiting for money to come in, and Max looked after him. And so I wrote about that. And then, so I might put together a book of essays of some of the things that I've done. But booksellers' memoirs actually are usually quite boring.
I don't think yours would be, from what I've...
Do you know, I've just been asked to... I was lucky enough. I travelled with another bookseller. We were kind of like... We weren't business partners at all, but we travelled together all the time. He was older than me. His name was Eric Korn, Emmy Korn. He wrote for the London Review of Books. He wrote for the TLS. And he was the resident on Round Britain quiz on the BBC. He was the resident... He was a genius. He wrote a PhD on the sensory perception of snails, but he could read Finnegan's Wake upside down.
I think I'd like to read that.
So, but he had been pushed in a pram with Oliver Sacks, the guy who wrote The Man Who Mistook His Wife. So me and Oliver became really good friends.
Well, Oliver Sacks, really?
We travelled with him. Every time I went to America, we'd come to the book fair I was, and then we go to Mexico and we go to Canada.
Well, because the film Awakenings is it's a beautiful film, which is highly underrated.
Yeah, I went to the premiere of that. Eric Clapton and Keith Richards sat behind me. Well, at the premiere of that film.
This ties into when I first met Jane, because I went round the house and she had Oliver Sacks on the shelf, and I was sort of bemused by it because I was like,
"Has Jane got Oliver Sacks?"
Yeah, she does. She's
also knows I know him.
I don't know.
He's dead now. I've just been asked by there's a girl in America, big writer, huge. She's got a contract to spend 4 years writing Oliver's life. And she's going to come and talk to me because I spent a lot of time with him. And
there's a few podcasts he did with Radio Lab. Did you ever? Yeah, his Radio Lab episodes were phenomenal.
He was an amazing man.
But I mean, going back to Jane's bookshelf, she's got some. There was an amazing book she used to have there when I used to stay over. She had the Dylan's Pub Guidebook.
I wrote that.
That's yours. I love that book.
I left it in her shop. About 6 copies.
I love that book. I nearly bought it about 2 or 3 times. I'm sorry, Jeff. I love that book. I used to sit there. The sky would be on in the background. My ex at the time would be faffing, and I would just be there, and I'd be reading that, going, "This book's freaking. I'm not making it up. It's amazing.
Do you know, I talked about hermaphrodites, right?
Right.
So I was writing that book. I'd almost finished it. Doing the research was terrible. I had to go to every one of those pubs.
Oh, it's a bird. It
was awful, awful. I had an advance, not much, but I had an advance. Spent it all on one weekend in London. So anyway, I was writing it, and I was down in Larne with Peter Blake, who was doing a thing on Undermilt Wood, the artist. I've known him for a long time. And so we were by the writing shed, and this guy I know, who's a big Dylan Thomas collector, who lives in a massive house above the writing shed, came down to see me. He's a funny guy. And he suddenly went like this, like he was palming a wrap of Coke to me. He said, "Oh, look at that." And I pick it up, look at it. And it's got this filthy poem by Dylan Thomas on it. It's a copy, it's a Xerox, but I know his handwriting, and it's all in capitals. And it's called A Complaint for Middlesex. But Middlesex is not the place, it's somebody who is Middlesex. So this poem is a sort of bit of doggerel, but the last line's something like, "Doesn't it come as an awful shock when you find they've got a cunt and a cock?" So, and he just palmed this to me. So I look at it and I get back and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so good. Nobody's ever seen it. I found out where it came from. It fell out of one of John Malcolm Brennan's books in Delaware Library, where all his books are. It fell out and somebody Xeroxed it, so it's out in the world now. So I said to my publishers, Old Welshman, "Look, I've got this poem and I want to put it in the book because it fitted with one of the pubs I was writing about at that point." So it's in the book, reproduced, and nobody's noticed it. Nobody said anything about it at all.
Well, I just sat there going, "Have I drunk there? Have I drunk there? Have I drunk there?" That's what I was doing with it. But there's something I've always wanted to ask. I mean, you know a lot more about Dylan than I ever will. What is the fascination with America? Why has he taken off in America and been so adorned in America?
I think because he went there at the height of his powers and did massive tours. They were like rock and roll tours. He was like, I don't like that thing when they talk about him being the first rock and roll poet, but he did incredible tours all around America. When I started to do book fairs in America, the number of people, I put nice Dylan Thomas in my case, who'd say, "Oh, we heard him read. We never forgot it." So he endeared himself. He also made a record of A Child's Christmas in Wales in America on his first trip, and that still sells by the million, and they play it on radio stations all over America. Every Christmas they put it on. And then he died there, and he died publicly. It took him a week to die. And it was all over the papers. So I think the fact that he died there, and he was huge there until they began to accept that the beat writers were serious writers. For a while, there was a hiatus after Dylan Thomas in this country as well, because he set the bar high and people didn't really know if he was great or if it was all nonsense. And
he died in some controversy as well.
Oh, sure, yeah. It took him a while, and the doctor gave him a big crank of heroin. That's what killed him. But he was not in good shape, and he was really caning it.
What did he die of eventually then, Joe?
Well, I don't know. There's about 3 or 4 books on it. Who Killed Dylan Thomas, Fatal Neglect. And basically, I'm not that bothered. He's dead. Doesn't make any difference. But it does seem to be, he said, the story is he went out on a binge, came back to his room, said to his girlfriend at the time, "I've drunk 18 straight whiskies. I think that's a record." Started to go into a coma. She called a doctor who'd been before and given him cortisone. And then she called him again, and the doctor gave him 1.5 grams of morphine. And he went into a coma and never recovered. And if he'd have recovered, he probably would have been brain damaged. They did a tracheotomy on him, and he was in a coma for 4 days. So the drink, he was drinking a lot at that point. And in America, he drank whiskey, and people got him drunk. They gave him... I was in America once. I was in Massachusetts near a big university, and the people I was staying with said, "Seamus Heaney's reading in the university tonight. We're not going to go to the reading, but we can go to the party afterwards." And I'd met Seamus because he came here, Seamus did, to this house.
Did he?
Yeah.
Right.
He came here when there were some girls living here. There were students at the university, and there was a knock on the door, and they were English students, and it was the professor of England from the university with Seamus Heaney next to him. When he got off the train at Swansea, the guy from the university said to him, "What do you want to do?" He said, "I'd like to go to Dylan Thomas's house."
Do you think that Dylan Thomas is revered more in America than he is
not
here?
anymore.
You don't think so anymore?
Not anymore. There was a point when he was, but now they want their own writers. They want to pay telephone numbers for Ginsberg and Kerouac and you know the Steinbeck and you know all the great American writers. So they're still fond of Dylan Thomas, and he, you know, they still. I sell Dylan Thomas in America. There's still people out there who collect him, who like to collect big books.
Do you
know?
think that we revere Dylan Thomas enough, or
it's not. It's what people do, what they do. I mean, I think he had a good year in 2014. I think Swansea did what they could, one way or another. Films got made, TV programs got made.
that was the centenary, wasn't it, of his birth?
Yeah, I got paid handsomely to take people out in canoes and read them Dylan Thomas in the estuary at Larne. So I was like,
Did you do it like that? Were you? No.
but I did it like this. No, it was great to. So there was a lot going on then, but I think now enough's been said.
That's an interesting point, Jeff. I mean, do you think that he sort of overshadows current art as well?
It's
sort of
tough.
poetry as well?
It's tough
Because you know, there's some poets in Wales and some poets I know will say that, well, look, it's all, you know, well and good to big him up and doff your cap to him and revere him and all the rest of it, but there's current poets as well.
Natalie put something up the other day. You know, Natalie.
Yeah, I know Natalie well. Actually,
she's a good poet. I think really. But she put something up.
Poet.
She put something up the other day saying, "Isn't it time we stopped revering the fat old dead Welshman and looked at young women poets?" Well, I wouldn't put a gender thing on this. You know, she's a great poet, but they're a good. You don't have to throw the gender thing there as well.
You don't. No.
But she voiced that opinion and she's entitled to it. And I do.
What's your take on that?
Well, I do think he's a hard act to follow. But you know, so's great music come out of Liverpool. But still, there's good. The choral is still in Liverpool. There's still good bands in Liverpool. You got to have something to aim for. I think. I've never been. I called my shop Dylan's. That was a bit obvious, but I've never been a big fan of Milkwood Cafes or Eli Jenkins, and I don't like some of the shit that TV and some of the films, and I don't know, but it just happens, and it's not. You see, that's the other thing. I think I don't think we would be talking about him now if Bob Dylan hadn't changed his name. I think that's a huge thing. And I once said this at some conference. Bob Dylan actually said in an interview, "I've done more for Dylan Thomas than he's ever done for me." And I agreed. And they all said, "Oh, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, he does." we wouldn't be talking about him as much. He's still a great writer. But the fact that, one of the greatest musical figures of the last century and still going strong, changed his name to this guy.
Didn't he win the Nobel Prize for Literature as well?
Bob did.
Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
He did, didn't he?
Yes, weird story. He didn't go and pick it up.
I didn't bother.
He sent Patti Smith, and she tried to sing Hard Rain and missed the words. And then he sent in an essay that he said he would have given if he'd gone to collect the award. And I read online, it had all been cut and pasted from university lectures.
But that would surprise me, Rob.
Not me.
He's crafty.
He's a devious, strange man, for sure. So I do think that made a big difference. The fact that he died in America, this is Dylan Thomas, died in America, died young. He's always in there already with James Dean and Marilyn Monroe. And then just when he's kind of on the downward slope, this folk singer comes along and changes his name from a Jewish heritage into a Welsh heritage. And I think that gets us interested, doesn't it? Even though he denied it loads of times, Bob Dylan did. In Chronicle, he finally does say that he did take the name from Dylan Thomas. But he says he didn't read much of his poetry. And although people like Professor Christopher Ricks write big books saying that Bob Dylan's a poet, and I think he is a poet, they try and see influences of Dylan Thomas. You can't really see influences. Just the name, that's all it is. I think. In a homage, you know. But if we think about it, Dylan Thomas was in New York, going to those bars, reading his poetry around. It was only 10 years later that Bob Dylan was singing folk songs in the same bars. So there was it was a tradition that didn't really break.
So unfortunately, though, we're going to have to wrap this up. Thanks a lot for coming down, Jeff. We'll definitely have to have you back on.
I think there's a lot more to plunder.
What social media and all that? Are you on any social media? Or?
Yeah, there's a book bus page on Facebook, Dylan's Mobile Bookstore on Facebook, and I think there's an Instagram account for it. My son does a lot of that for me.
Okay.
And he's not dropped me right in it yet.
Matter of time.
Sure, I know. He sails closer to win sometimes, but he's good.
And if people want to buy the books off you, where can they get them?
Well, I was doing the Uplands market regularly, and I'd go to festivals. I'm still online. There's a website for the bookstore.
What's the website?
Website is just www.dylans.com.
Okay.
I bought that years and years ago, and Dylan Thomas had gone. So I just thought I'll have dylans.com. And it's fair enough, I think. It's worked for me. And then a massive fashion designer's daughter opened a sweet shop in New York and in Chicago and in Boston called Dylan's Candy Bar. Her name was Dylan. And she came to me, she wanted to buy my website. And I thought, fuck it. All these years selling books and I'm going to make a fortune selling dylans.com to, was it not Karl Lagerfeld? It was some huge designer. His daughter opened these fantastic sweet shops where kids could have parties and the Mutant Ninja Turtles were in there and all that sort of stuff. And he came back and they offered me $500. I went back and said, I don't cross the road for $500. So it didn't happen. But yeah, dylans.com, they can, and if they want a book, they can email me and say, have you got this or have you got that? I still do that kind of thing.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
No worries.
Been brilliant.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
Good night.